Hello, fellow risk takers, and welcome to my worst investment ever. Stories of loss to keep you winning. In our community, we know that to win in investing, you must take risk, but to win big, you've got to reduce it. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm on a mission to help 1 million people reduce risk in their lives. To reduce risk in your life, go to myworstinvestmentever.com today and take the risk reduction assessment I created from the lessons I've learned from more than 500 guests. Fellow risk takers, this is your worst podcast host, Andrew Stotz from A Stotz Academy, and I'm here with featured guest Mahesh Murthy. Mahesh, are you ready to join the mission?
Oh yes, I've failed so often, and I just should have been featured in all 500 of those. But yeah, happy to be here.
Yeah, it's amazing. You said the same thing that everybody says is that I got so many, I don't know which one to choose from. But I
Yeah.
always tell people, well, pick that story that really has a lesson to it. So there we go. I want to introduce you to the audience. Mahesh has helped launch Amazon, over 60 startups, a few hundred brands, and a few satellites. He's a marketer, entrepreneur, and investor. As a marketer, he worked on Amazon, Pepsi, and Nike. He helped launch MTV and its rival Channel V. He founded an ad firm named Pinstorm, and he wrote ads, including Asia's best ad of the decade. As an entrepreneur, he failed in his first three ventures and is taking a company public soon and has taken another into space, Asia's first private firm to launch satellites. As an investor, he has run three venture funds and was voted India's best VC of the year twice. So, wow, take a minute and fill in a little bit more, Mahesh, about the value that you bring to this world.
I tell you the value I don't bring. I have no formal education, Andrew. I'm a high school dropout. It's the value I bring is I think the point of view which comes up from the ground, which isn't necessarily taught in any MBA school that I know of, or that I've hired people from, or that I've funded people from. So I'm a bit of a marketer, a bit of on-ground truther, so to speak, as in, I've been selling stuff and been walking the streets since I was 17. And I generally take all theoretical knowledge and projections and put it in a bullshit meter right up against, look, I've been there, I've done that, I've sold to these guys. That doesn't seem quite right. So I think that's the only thing I bring here, which is a healthy disrespect for, what is taken to be common sense, or what is taken to be, you know, well-known so-called facts. So I'm in some ways, the non-MBA, or the other voice in the room, the uneducated yokel. That's who I am.
The anti MBA.
You said it, man.
I like it. It's interesting because one of the people I studied with was a guy named Dr. W. Edwards Deming, and he was saying that, MBA is teaching it all wrong. They're teaching people the wrong way to manage people. They're teaching
Yeah.
people, to just focus on numbers and set targets and all that. And many young people are getting lost in this stuff, and they think that doing a good job means, setting up KPI, key performance indicators, and then kicking everybody's butt. And they just miss so much of what really, really works in motivating people and getting people, excited about your ideas.
Yeah, that, and I think the other thing about MBAs are that the education kind of is all about peer grouping. What's the other guy doing? What's his starting salary? What's my starting salary? What's his theory? So the entire thing is about, well, I need to fit in, and I need to slot myself and be in that cohort. So it's about blind thinking, and often, it's like, what's the other guy getting for his startup? What is his valuation? That should be my valuation. He bought a BMW 5 Series. I can't make do with a 3 Series. I need a 5 Series, so on and so forth. So it's this blind benchmarking of senseless metrics, whether it's personal or business. That's kind of, because, like you said, it basically puts a numerical value on everything out there, and often numerical values by themselves don't make any difference, don't make any sense. So I think that's really where even my lesson came from people who just blame, basically, blindly benchmark greed, for instance, and said, well, that guy's so greedy, I've got to be as greedy as that. And
Mm.
anyway, back to you. So I think that's really where it all came from.
Blind benchmarking of meaningless metrics. Wow,
That's right.
that's a great one. And I think, that the lesson too is that when you're so focused on benchmarking against another company, another individual, the big loss to society is that you're just trying to meet or match or a little bit exceed that. And you're missing the huge opportunities that are out there that are going to come from focusing on your customer, not your competitor.
And I keep coming up with this all the time. The people who give me all these very complex spreadsheets that says, I've done this extensive consumer and customer analysis, and this is how we're going to win against the others. And if they have features A, B, C, D, E, I'm going to do A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and H. And if he's selling at $100, I'm going to sell at $95, and that's why I'll win. And it leads me to think, and ask, well, have you even figured that the customer wants F, G, and H? Have you even figured that the customer actually wants to pay less than 100, or is he willing to pay more? As opposed to, just this entire business isn't about, blindly benchmarking as we talked about it. It's about having an insight into the customer and saying, well, what is he looking for? What is she looking for? And what is it you can give that others can't or others aren't? As opposed to saying, well, this is what my rivals do. I mean, I keep saying, the best way to defeat your competition is to ignore them and focus on your customers. And if you keep your customers happy, your competition will die by itself. But the minute you start focusing on your competition, you're not going to get anywhere very, for a long, long time.
So, for the listeners out there, I mean, this already is a great lesson, and it's a great lesson. It's a masterclass in strategy, really, because ultimately, strategy is about where you direct your energy and where you choose not to direct your energy. And the lesson from this, I hear, is direct your energy to satisfying and delighting your customer, and you'll be amazed at how far you'll go as you continue to develop there, rather than trying to set your strategy to be a me too copycat, a little bit better than. So, great masterclass right there in strategy. I appreciate that, Mahesh.
Thanks, man.
So
Thanks, man.
now it's time to share your worst investment ever. And since no one goes into their worst investment thinking it will be, take a minute and fill in a bit about the circumstances leading up to it, and then tell us your story.
All right. So my background basically was that I was lucky enough to be in the US at the start of the dot-com revolution. I was with Silicon Valley firm, an advertising firm, one of the early digital advertising firms. Actually, they goofed up and made me a board director, etc. They gave me a territory to run. I read about this small, tiny startup in Seattle that had 5 or 6 people that wanted to sell stuff online. And I remember going to my board and saying, hey, those guys, those are the guys we must handle. And my partner said, come on, I mean, it's B2C. Internet's never going to happen B2C. That's nonsense. And we were doing a lot of work with MCA and McDonald's and a bunch of other kind of B2B companies, right? And but I really prevailed, and I kind of begged and said, no, this is it. I've got to go. This, you've got to get this. And finally, they blessed and said, all right, go meet them. So I went over, met. This little strapling of a company called Amazon, started working with them. A couple of years later, I had learned a lot from Jeff, who was my direct client. There were only 7 people in the company, and so on and so forth. Anyway, fast forward, after that, I decided my company went public, got acquired. I, had a couple of CEO jobs, wasn't interested. Thought I'd kind of come back to India and bring this little e-commerce and knowledge back to India. So I came back to India and I started also. I learned about angel investing in on the west coast of the U.S. And uh, so my background before that was that I was an advertising guy, creative director. So interestingly, when I was an advertising guy about 15 years earlier, I was working with a small agency and I had applied for a job at a bigger place, and this guy kind of interviewed me and said my work wasn't good enough. I said, all right. So anyway, 15 years later, I was doing some interesting work, and so I came back to India, and who were to approach me but this guy, my ex-boss, and of course I had a sweet spot for him. I had a lot of respect for him, and kind of was, little. He was the guy who turned me down and didn't hire me. Anyway, he came to me saying, hey, my partner and I have this very cool idea. What we want to do is we have so many teachers in India, and we want to teach students outside India, right? School students, and education. We have good teachers in there. We simply want to deliver the education online. Now, remember, this was 99, 2000. Back then, so I was off by maybe 10, 15 years. My bandwidths were like 9.6 kbps or something of that sort. Nevertheless, I was all very excited and said, okay, this sounds great. Let's create this company to hire teachers in India and teach students outside India. So we started, and we kind of figured, all right, and because the teachers in India were teaching to a particular set Indian school syllabus, we said, let's at least start with the Indian schools that run on an Indian syllabus outside India. So there's lots of places, including every embassy, large Indian embassy in the world, plus places where there's a lot of Indians, as in the Middle East or East Africa and Southeast Asia, where there are Indian syllabus schools, right? So we focused on them. We hired teachers, and we started. And my entire thing was I was pretty much hands off. And every month, that's how's it going? And this guy come in, he and his partner would come back and say, it's going really well. It's going really well. And every 3 months, I say, it's going well. We will break through soon. We need a little more money. And I put in more money and more money. And I think my naivety and my stupidity was that I was a little in awe of this guy who's who's senior to me. And I just believed him. And all I did was every 3 months write another check and said, that's good. Tell me how I can help. They said, no, we're doing fine. Finally, after about 2 years of this in 2000 or 2001, he said, we need a lot of money. At which point, my partner, I was investing from my own pocket, and I said, let's dive into this and look a little. So, we went to the office, and it was not my. I believed it was a little uncouth to land up at your investee company's offices and kind of be the investor, but we did, because it was 2 years, and we kept hearing promises, and we saw, and sorry, a small segue. Every time we'd say, look, we're spending so much on renting computers, so much on renting office. Why don't we just buy these computers, right? And back then, you could buy a decent computer for, I'd say about 30 or 30,000 rupees, and we were still paying at that time about 3,000 rupees a month to rent each computer. So in that sense, we could have bought it within 10 months of the rental we were paying for it. But it was already 24 months. We were still renting. And I'd keep saying, why are we paying for this? Why are we paying for this space? We had large space. We had about 20 teachers, and we had about, they could easily fit in 2,000 square feet, but we had rented 4,000 square feet. And those line items for computer rentals and space rentals would just simply wipe a huge amount of cost out every month. And I kept saying, why are we doing this? And I was told by both, no, we just want to be flexible. We don't want to invest in assets that we don't know anything about, and we'll grow. That's why we don't want to take space. We're taking it right from the beginning. So I just bought into all this. And a couple of years later, I said, look, come on, we're not growing. We're still renting computers 24 months later. We paid for the computer 3 times over already, and we're still renting them. And this is about 30 machines, and we're renting all this space, double the space that we need, or more than double the space we need. And we're not making revenues, etc. And we went in, right? And I then met the teachers. They're they're a very enthusiastic bunch, so and so forth. Obviously one issue was we were not having sales, so I tried to figure out why that wasn't happening. Meanwhile, as an aside, I said, okay, I just said, just send me all the receipts and so on and so forth, right? And I just want to see all the expenses, and they were kind of handed up. Now, among the expenses, I kind of found this strange thing where the middle name of one of the people signing the receipts for the computers was the same as the middle name of another person, signing the rental receipt. So I said, that's very strange. Why are we renting coincidentally? I mean, is it a coincidence that the people that we're renting the computers from are related to the people that we're renting the space from? And then I dug a little deeper. I did a few Google searches. Then I figured out that we were renting the computers from the founder's sister, and we were renting the space from his mother. Not this guy, but his partner, right? That incensed me. So essentially what he was doing was he was simply taking a chunk of change and putting it into his own pocket, right? The teachers, when getting paid, he was making sure he was getting paid hand over fist, because literally, 2/3 of the running cost of the company was this computer rental and this space rental. So he was paying himself rent via his mother. He was paying himself for the computers via his wife. He was paying himself something else via his sister. And he kept saying, I'm not taking really any salary. And I got incensed because, for me, this was an extraordinary breach of faith. So I went to him and said, you know, uh, is it true that you're renting the space from your mother? He says, yeah, well, I'm just paying commercial rentals. I said, but you're renting 2.5 times the space, and you've been taking this money from day one while we've not been able to hire teachers or invest in marketing. I said, is it true we're renting all these computers? Oh yeah, but we have to do that. I said, but in all this time of all the money that I've given you, you've taken 60% of the money home personally yourself. All right. Aren't you ashamed of yourself? And he got very pissed off. He said, "You know what? Look at the other guys in other companies. Look at how much they're taking home. At least I need to take home this much. And we're actually, I'm not just taking it home this way. It's market prices. Who works at market price? You're a startup and so on and so forth." And there was a really, really long and not very pleasant discussion. And well, at the end of it, he came and said, "Oh, it seems like you've lost faith in me. I just don't want to work with you. I'm going to get out of this company." I said, "All right, man, that's fine, because this is cheating, right? You're just basically ripping me off by simply sending me bills from unrelated people, from related people for things that you don't need." And the other founder, the guy who I had a lot of respect for, I said, "Look, dude, I expected a little more from you than this. Did you know this is happening?" He says, "Yeah." I mean, he was a bit of a space bubble guy. He was a creative guy, and yeah, but it's okay. He's a business guy, and the worst thing that happened was he came a month later and said, "Well, if you can fire him, what base do I have? You can fire me as well." I said, "Well, it's not fighting in the sense he was cheating, and that's a clear breach of the agreement we've written, where he was cheating me, right? And you should be lucky I haven't reported him and put him in jail." He says, "No, no, no. I'm very insecure now, but because if you can take out that guy, you can take out this guy, and before you take me out, I'm going to leave as well." So suddenly we had this crazy point where we had this startup where 60% of the money had been stolen by one of the founders. The teachers, the poor people who'd left good, tenured jobs were not being paid. We had very little money left, and both founders had exited, and we were screwed, right? So, so I had this company with no leadership, about 25 staff, no customers, no money. And so that's when the horror started. That's when my partner and I dug in, jumped in, did what we could. We went abroad, tried to find some customers. We did whatever it is. It took about 1.5 years. We found a little bit of money, some few customers here and there. We paid the teachers. We slowly let them off. We paid them, pretty much in full, and we developed some content. And about 2 years later, we sold it for some, I think 2002 or three, to another friend's company who was building a education giant, and we got some shares in that company in 2003 or two. And then what was worse was that while sending money to this guy, I was sending it from one of my bank accounts, and he had failed to report it as an investment. Right, he had kind of reported it as revenue, so we started getting hit with tax bills, because my investment was reported as revenue, and the revenue guys came and said pay tax on that. So it was like a triple whammy, right? So I put money, and then I have to pay tax on the money I have put in. So it took a huge amount of time to clear that out. We fought cases in court that lasted for the next 8 years. It was a terrible, terrible story overall. But finally, I think in 2017 or 18, 15 years after I sold the shares for a pittance. So, I'd invested something like $350,000, something like that, $400,000. It went public, and I got about $40,000 back. So I made 10 cents on the dollar, or something of that sort.
It went public, as in the company that you sold it to, that you got shares
Yeah,
in.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah. The acquirer went public, and I had a kind of 0.1x return on the entire thing, apart from an extraordinary loss. So it was. My partner and I we would keep consoling ourselves, saying, when we were going through this horror by saying, look, this is a character building exercise, right?
But I've
And by
had
the end
enough
of it,
character building.
yeah, by the end of it, we said, my muscles are bulging with character. I can't take any more character. I've had way too much character right now.
I'll
I
take money
just, I,
now.
yeah, I just don't want any more character. I'm like simply, I'm buff with character right now. So that if anything
Wow.
was one
And
one of the horror stories. So
how
yeah,
would you
and I have a few
describe
more.
how would you
Yeah.
describe the lessons that you learn?
Oh gosh, right. Of course, the first one was I was, I always thought that I was a good judge of character, and just a reminder to myself, nobody's a good judge of character, right? Even no matter how much you think of yourself. Two, I kind of figured that. It's being hands off and all is very cool, but it's not very useful. I mean,
Mm.
you've got to be hands on far more often. You know, because in one more company, I saw this happening later on, where one of the guys, had a particular headcount on his salary sheets, but when we went to his office, we found three people on the headcount who were not in the office.
Mm.
And later on, we on inquiring, we found it was his wife's sister, and her brother. Right. So again, we shut that company down because yeah, this is a common way for Indian entrepreneurs. I don't know about Thai or other,
Siphoning.
to siphon money out by putting fake people on the on the payroll. So anyway, so one lesson was don't go with don't just you can trust anybody. It doesn't matter. Make
Yeah.
sure the paperwork's not. Second, again, the importance of paperwork when it comes to I was sending money, and I had no idea that these guys were accounting it wrongly. Right? They accounted it as revenue as opposed to as investment. So it was a huge tax issue. So make sure your tax stuff is right. Third, make sure there's a second line. If you end up firing the founders, or the founders cheat or steal money, there's got to be somebody else. So you're going to end up running the company. I mean, for 2 years, we ran a company we knew nothing about, right?
Mm.
Doing anything we could, spending a lot more money, and in effect, throwing good money after bad. And maybe in retrospect, we could have simply shut it down earlier and just let it all go, and we would have probably come out slightly further ahead. But we just kept trying to do the good thing, and we were able to salvage a tiny bit 0.1x at the end of the entire exercise. So loads of lessons on
Mm.
pretty much a wake up call for me. I mean, I was then merely angel investing, and that was the road to creating my first venture fund. And so I was, it just once you do this on the ground, you just learn a lot better in terms of the tests, the checks and balances you need to do, the paperwork you need to do. No matter, you could be investing in your best friend, but
Yep.
you still got to have to get the paperwork done.
So maybe I'll summarize a couple of things I take away. The first one is that I basically categorized all the mistakes, or let's say 6 most common mistakes that people make. I've come up with that. And the number one most common one is that they fail to do their research. Number two is that they fail to properly assess and manage risks. Number three is that they were driven by emotion or flawed thinking. But I'm thinking about you about number four, which is misplaced trust. They just trusted the wrong person, and that was significant. And then number five, I think, also relates to this, which is failed to monitor their investment. And then number six actually relates too, because it's called invested in a startup. And I just found so many people that have lost all their money in startups. So the takeaways that I would give, number one, is if you're going to invest in startups, invest in 10 startups. Never invest in one.
I'll go beyond. Let's say to 20, right? Statistically, I've looked at this.
Yeah.
The numbers start working for you, Andrew. When you're at the 20 mark, you have a reasonable chance that two or three of them will give you 10x.
Yep.
Another two or three of them will give you 2 to 3x. Five will die, and another 5 or 7 will be zombies. You put it all together, you will end up at 20% of 15 to 25% IRR, depending on how it works out, right?
So,
So it's 20. It's portfolio game. It's like you don't
yep.
invest in one stock, you invest in 20 stocks, you invest in 20 startups. Sorry, back to you.
So that's great advice from a master. And I think for the listeners out there, the next time someone comes to you and say, I've got this great idea and I want you to invest, you just tell them, hold on, I've got to invest in 19 others before I start investing in yours. So The second
or,
thing,
or I have to commit to investing in 20. I mean, you may be number 14, but I can't give you all my money. I need to make sure that my money is divided across,
yep,
15 to 20 or more startups. So there's a reasonable chance that two or three will work out. Look, if we knew which two or three would work out, we would never invest in the other 17, but we don't know, right? So hence you have to roll the dice 20 times, roll the die, and then two or three will come up sixes.
yep. The other takeaway is something that I tell, like I do one part of my business is an outsourced CFO where we basically just help companies, particularly that are struggling, to get their accounting and finance in order and all that. But what I've realized now, after my own experience in investing in my own businesses and the like, is this: have monthly full financial statements, balance sheet and income statement, and have a monthly meeting to review them. If you do this, almost all of the problems that you're going to face can be resolved, because you would start saying, wait a minute, why is this revenue booked when we didn't have any revenue? Oh, wait a minute, so you're booking the capital influx into the company as revenue? No, that's got to stop now. And what are these expenses, and that type of thing. So you can solve a lot of problems. And I know that the thing is that we want to trust people and we want to say, they know what they're doing and all that. No, they don't. Most entrepreneurs know nothing about accounting and finance, and they just put it aside. They think that they can just do it later, and they accumulate an absolute mess. And undoing a mess that has happened 6 months, 12 months, 24 months ago is a huge project. So
Yeah.
that's kind of my biggest takeaway. And for everybody out there, for your own business, for businesses that you're investing in, get those financial statements every month. And if somebody goes, no, we just need to have them once a year, we've got this account, and he does, no. For my money, is once a month. Anything you would add to that?
Well, my thing was, the two kind of modulations of that is I was happy with once in 3 months because there was simply not enough business. We didn't have enough money to even pay the accountant once a month. But once in 3 months is a reasonable check, given that it's a low amount of outflow. The second thing is, I couldn't change my character. Couldn't become an untrusting person overnight. So I really went from trust to trust but verify, right? So finally, yes, so there is still that, right brain side of me that says, yeah, I have to emotionally bond and understand what this is about. But I need somebody else. So essentially, I had to do a good cop, bad cop thing. I had somebody else in the fund and said, look, this is a DD guy. And he or she is going to dig and, do the proctology or whatever it is to figure out, because you can get an invoice, but somebody has to dive behind the invoice to say who's invoicing. Is that a legit party? Is it a related party? Right? Because it's just not the appearance of putting a number on the spreadsheet, but diving into see, is that number real? Because we got the correct numbers. It's
Yep.
just that those numbers were from a wrong source, right? Where from a related party source, which kind of sort of and you've got to put both the numbers together with the story saying this person keeps insisting that we need to rent computers and rent more space than we need. And then you voila, figure out that he's renting from his wife and sister,
Mm.
right? So that when you put that together, it's fraud. So so it's both of these. You need the soft and the hard sides, and probably if you're an investor, make sure that you have somebody who's hard edged, so you can keep your good cop, smile along with the guy and not necessarily become an asshole or whatever. But you have somebody else on your side who is doing, the deep dive. So those are two my own kind of slight,
Yes.
views on that.
Let me introduce you to my pit bull.
Yes,
He's
that's
really
right.
nice,
Yes,
except
he,
when he's
yeah,
off the leash.
yeah. We just say, I just say that's my DD guy, my due diligence guy.
Exactly.
I have a DD guy. You kind of like down. So that's my DD guy. Don't worry, he's going to look into it. And
Yep.
later on, they find out that that person that's a pretty forensic exam that
Yep.
person's doing.
Yep. Yep. So, based upon what you learned from this story and what you continue to learn, what one action would you recommend our listeners take to avoid suffering the same fate?
Make sure that you don't invest alone. Make sure that if you're investing, that you have a chartered accountant or somebody, an accountant you really dislike, who's been unkind to you because they were so thorough. But get that person on your side working for you, who's able to look at the books and look deep into the books as opposed to look at them superficially. That's one that I would really recommend.
Mm,
And outside of that, just make sure that the company has a second line or a third line, because you may end up at a point where if it's a one person company and that person leaves, there's nobody else. So make sure that there is a C team. There's a CXO team of somebody who can take over till you can find somebody else.
right.
And in the early stage, do make sure that if you have, say, $200,000, keep $10,000 for each of 20 investments. Don't give one person $100,000. So make sure
Mm,
that you have the stamina to be able to do that, or invest in a group. There are angel groups everywhere. I'm sure they're
yeah.
in Bangkok.
Yep.
They're all over India. Come together and invest in a group, but make sure in those cases as well that there is your pit bull DD person whose job it is to go. These things tend to get cleaned up a little as you
Mm,
go, as you get into Series A, Series B, but not fully. Indian papers are full of entrepreneurs who have raised 100 million, who are unicorns, who have defrauded their companies of 50 million plus personally. So fraud is rampant in the
mm,
entrepreneurial space because it's greed, it's rampant. So just make sure that you understand that there's a bunch of people who are out there who are taking your money and they don't think it's enough. So they will do whatever it is to rip as many people off of money as possible.
got it.
So just make sure you don't know who they are. So make sure you put the systems in place so that that doesn't happen to your money.
Last question. What's your number one goal for the next 12 months?
To launch more satellites and sell more of them. So we've done 4 already. I hope to launch another 4 in the next 12 months, and that's a big business. I can tell you, I spent a lot of time in advertising, where you'd spend, you know, 1 month, 2 weeks doing a campaign, 2 weeks trying to sell it to a client, and at the end of the day, probably make 5-figure US dollars in fees, so 4
Mm,
figure for that kind of work. Selling satellites, I wish I, you sell one, it's you're in the uh, 6-7 figure mark already. Yeah,
yeah.
so it's just I've learned the difference between doing products and services. So I'm kind of going through a bit of a change myself. So I'm the advertising copywriter turned satellite guy, whatever. It's a weird one. There you go.
When you look up in the sky, we'll see you. Well,
Yeah, hopefully not the birds are there. I mean, I'm not going to go up there. So these are communication and observation satellites, and there's a lot of fun. I've learned a lot in doing this, in making them.
ex- exciting. Well, listeners, there you have it. Another story of loss to keep you winning. If you haven't yet taken the risk reduction assessment, I challenge you to go to myworstinvestmentever.com right now and start building wealth the easy way by reducing risk. As we conclude, Mahesh, I want to thank you again for joining our mission. And on behalf of A. Stotz Academy, I hereby award you alumni status for turning your worst investment ever into your best teaching moment. Do you have any parting words for the audience?
Trust but verify.
Trust but verify. What great parting words. And that's a wrap on another great story to help us create, grow, and protect our wealth. Fellow risk takers, let's celebrate that today we added one more person to our mission to help 1 million people reduce risk in their lives. This is your worst podcast host, Andrew Stotz, saying, I'll see you on the upside.